Today, as we kick off the first episode of 2021, I want to talk to you about new beginnings, of course, but specifically around the topic of what you may need to leave behind in 2020. Now, I know most of us, there are plenty of things we'd like to leave behind in 2020, but today I really want to dive into talking about freeing yourself, leaving behind that which is no longer serving you. And I'm going to share 5 steps that have been really tremendously helpful to me in my own personal journey of letting things go and releasing them. I hope that they'll be helpful to you too. As we get started, I want to invite you into 2 different things that are, concepts that I'd like for you to just hang on to, ruminate a little on as you're listening today and as you go forward throughout this first week of 2021. The first one is actually one of my favorite Proverbs. It's Proverbs 17:9. It says, "Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends." I think we're all aware of how we can get something in our head or in our heart and not release it, and we know that it's not good. It's not good for us. Never mind what it may or may not be doing to the other person, but those thoughts, those negative things that may whirl about things that we've done wrong or that somebody else has done wrong that we hang on to, we know that those aren't good, and yet we continue to let them roll. I'm going to talk to you today about how to slow that roll, stop it altogether, but hang on to that proverb. Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends. And the second concept is what you've done is not who you are. Every day throughout the year is a new day, is a new dawn, and you get to start over and be a better version than you were yesterday. Part of that may absolutely include leaving some things behind from just yesterday. It may be leaving some things behind from many decades ago. I don't know your personal story, but I do know that most of us need to work on how we release things, how we let things go, how we forgive ourselves and others. Guys, there are a great many things in my life that I've asked others and God for forgiveness over, and then I chose to continue to hold on to them myself. That practice is one that I know is not foreign for a whole lot of people. Years of self-work and discovery lead me back to a consistent practice of not only asking for forgiveness from others, but in learning how to forgive myself. I've learned to ask myself really good questions, pray very specifically, and I've surrounded myself with others who help steer me toward letting go more rapidly. I'd love for you to do the same and experience the freedom that that can bring. Guys, I'll never forget preparing for a message that I was delivering at our church. Where I would speak on occasion at the church, and on this occasion, I was asked to speak, and the very first thing that came to mind that I was going to talk about was in being transparently you and in embracing who you are in God and what your identity is and where your identity lies. And I spent, as per usual, probably around 20 hours preparing this message. And it was July, we were on vacation and stayed at my parents' house at the lake beautiful, beautiful lake setting. And I was sitting out under the covered porch, looking over the lake and reading what I had written and preparing for the message the next day. I was praying, and I was told that what I had prepared, what I had spent all that time preparing for, that wasn't what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about something very different. And I was terrified. I got up in front of our church congregation and shared a variety of things about my life that I had not shared outside of a very small circle of people that were very close to me. And many of those things I felt God called me to share that morning were things that I was truly afraid of judgment for as a pastor's wife, as a businesswoman, as a mom, as a friend. I truly was nauseous. And yet I knew God was calling me to share these things that morning. How would they view me when they found out that I had been divorced twice, or that I was battling an addiction to cigarettes, along with a variety of other things in my life that I wasn't proud of? Why in the world was God calling me to share all of this with them? I stood up there sharing honestly. I would tell you that I know that morning that God was speaking through me, or I wouldn't have been able to do it, because it was so much that was so deeply personal to me. And yet there were better questions to ask. There were better questions to ask about why I felt the way that I was feeling. Why was I hiding behind what I believed others wanted to see? Why wasn't I comfortable sharing my mistakes and my struggles? Why was I so focused on what I thought they wanted to see instead of being authentically me? Well, I'm going to tell you that part of that, in hindsight, in looking back at things, is that I had this idea of perfection. I'll never forget sitting on my front porch. I had just quit smoking, and the lead pastor of our church came with his wife to deliver a gift to my husband. And he wasn't there. He was out on an errand. And so we sat on the front porch and we were just chatting. And the men had just been off at a men's ministry event. And apparently during this event, one of the other pastors pointed at my husband with the lead pastor and said, "He's your next associate pastor." And my husband laughed at that notion, and I was frankly mortified by it. They were sitting on my front porch, and I remember going, seriously? And I don't know if you've ever been addicted to anything, quit anything. I don't care, food, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes for me, quitting smoking. You're not necessarily your best self in those early days of quitting smoking. And I am looking at this guy who's telling me that I am part of this calling. And my immediate response was, I'm not a pastor's wife. And, I think about all of that and not wanting people to see me. And I think about the selfishness and the arrogance around where I was. I think that experience of me standing there, sharing with those couple hundred people that day and bearing all of who I thought I was Remember back to that beginning statement where I said what you've done is not who you are. I'll tell you what, I know with a fullness in my heart today that I am a child of God in all of my brokenness, in all of my transgressions, in all of the things that I have done wrong in my life. I am so deeply loved and highly favored, and guess what? So are you. We don't need to hide behind what we believe we want others to see. We don't need to be perfect. That's not what God calls us to. An extraordinary number of people approached me following that sermon with hugs, with tears, with messages of thanks and sharing feelings they otherwise wouldn't have. The journey to, through, and following that message brought me to a place where I knew it was time for me to let go of a lot of weight that I had been choosing to carry through a lack of self-forgiveness. Maybe it's time you do the same. You don't have to live in this space where you poison yourself every day with the belief that your mistakes and the fear of what others will think guide you. Choose today to release something that you've been holding on to. Let's talk about those 5 steps. The first step is naming it. Frankly, you may not be aware. We think about it. When you are in a place where you're shaming yourself or you're feeling shamed by somebody else, think about that. What is that? What are you holding on to? You've got to start by naming it. And then secondly, what did you learn from it? What did you learn from that experience? Third thing, share it with someone else you feel safe sharing it with. Maybe not a couple hundred people to start, maybe just one. Make sure that it's a safe place. Say the words, I am not this thing. I am releasing myself from this thing. The 5th step is to repeat the 4th step as many times as you need to when those thoughts creep back in. And by the way, expect that they will. This is not a one and done process. You've got to name it. You've got to examine what you learned from it, share it with somebody else, and say those words over and over again. I'm not a smoker. I have released myself from smoking. Thanks be to God, I have been smoke-free for 8 years now. I am not a smoker. I am releasing myself from that. I don't need to tell myself that every day today because it's been a really long time. But there are still days where I smell it, I see it, I watch it on a movie, and that thought comes back into my mind and I need to release myself from it. I'm not a smoker. I'm released from that, right? Whatever it is that is binding you, you gotta let it go. It's not serving you. Let's talk a little bit more about number 5, which is that repeating it as many times as you need to as those thoughts creep back in, because I think that this is one of the trickiest parts. We want to forgive ourselves or forgive others for our transgressions or theirs, and we want it to be a one and done deal. We want to be like, okay, I'm over that, next, move on. And the fact of the matter is, it just doesn't work that way because we're triggered. We get triggered by different things. I use the smoking thing as an example because it's certainly easy for me to do that, right? I'm triggered when I see somebody smoking, or I see it on television, or I maybe had a tremendously stressful day. I might be triggered by that, and that thought comes back in. And instead of beating myself up over it 8 years later, I just go, oh, that's familiar. I recognize that. I know what I need to say. I am not a smoker. That does not serve me. I am released from that, right? I have to reprogram myself to know what I need to say in response to that. And instead of beating myself up over it, I welcome it. I know, I expect that it's going to come. The same thing happens early in this process, only way more frequently. And as much as I'd like to say that you can just say, oh, done with that, move on next, the likelihood is something's going to trigger you. Something is going to come up that's going to bring up those feelings. Something, you're going to be upset about something and you're not even going to know why you're upset about it. And thinking upon it later, you're going to go, you know what? It was that thing. I am released from that. I am no longer dealing with that, right? I was talking to my own coach not terribly long ago, and I was really frustrated with myself because I got upset about something. And he so gently reminded me that I wasn't going to be able to turn that off. It was like, let's fast forward to the beginning. By the way, just so you know, you can't stop that. That thought is going to come in, but how quickly you respond to it and how quickly you move from it, if it's not something that's healthy for you, is the important part. We want to minimize that time frame that you're beating yourself up. So it comes in and you're, something that used to take you a day to get over, or 2 days to get over, or a week or a month, or whatever the case might be. Maybe you've never gotten over it. You're letting it go faster, sooner, better, right? The objective is for you to recognize it, name it, and then continuously remind yourself, reprogram yourself, that's no longer a part of your life. There was an amazing author, Viktor Frankl, wrote a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. It was an excellent book. He has a tremendous story. A quote from him says, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." There's so much that we can do, that we can control. We have the power to choose our responses every day in every way. I encourage you, friends, to be kind and compassionate to yourself as you work through self-forgiveness and letting go of those things that are no longer serving you as we step in to this new year. Look forward to talking to you soon.